Welcome to Tell the Damn Story, the show that explores the many ways to navigate the successes and failures that aspiring and struggling writers face to make your journey that much easier.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, it is Tell the Damn Story. I'm Chris Ryan, hybrid author of all sorts of stuff, emerging and changing every week. And that guy over there, that is the legendary Alex Simmons, ladies and gentlemen. He is an icon of icons of your mom. All right, so Alex, how are you today?
Wow, you need another cup of coffee, bro.
It's tea, and I have it right here. Thank you very much.
That's tea, right? Well, I have my Mickey Mouse cup here, and I'm having some coffee, so we're good here. Hey, I'm fine, Chris. Oh, by the
Yes.
way, first off, folks,
Hi,
that is
everybody.
Ryan. He is my buddy of 106 years. I'm 116. He's 106. But he's
True.
been my friend, my co-writer, co-host, best bud through trials and tribulations. And we've worked on a number of projects together, and we've got a few others coming down the pike. But we're
Right, and Alex, we do all that
yes.
so that our audience's journey, their writing journey, is simpler and smoother.
Is that why we do that?
That's the kind of guys we are. If you
Yeah,
know,
I wondered what kind of
if you want
guy.
to know the truth, we
There
just
have been questions about that.
we have the hardest time, ladies and gentlemen, tamping down the halos so that we can record this for you.
Yeah, you can also notice that my hair will disappear periodically. For those of you that
Well,
are watching the
Mine has disappeared, not so periodically.
Today's episode, folks, we talk quite a bit, as Chris is saying, we share as much information about the journey of creative writing as we can to make your journey that much easier. And we often talk about different techniques and methodologies for writing this and that and building stories and plots and worlds and all that. And that's great. What we're going to talk about today is why some of those tips and methodologies work on the basic human being.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk a little bit about how the mind works and how we as writers can use certain tips and techniques to trigger or inspire certain reactions in our audiences.
So what you do here that connects to the other side, and we can show you ways to help that connection.
Yes, there you go.
Today on Tell the Damn Story.
So get your pen and paper because these little tips, and we're going to give you 5 in particular.
5. It's like
gonna help
Sesame
you
Street today.
focus.
5.
Yeah. Yes, it's a Sesame Street moment there. Yes.
5 little tips.
Yeah. So we're going to give you 5 tips today, and we're going to start with the first one. I think we should do the first one. Oh, no, actually, before we do that, Chris,
Yes.
what have you been up to? Because this is still the early part of the year.
Yes, been a triple play. In time for the holidays, we expanded the first ever volume of Soul Scream Anthology.
Yes, which is a collection of hybrid horror stories.
Yes, all of Soul Scream is that. And Come All You Faithless is related to Christmas and the holidays. And it was originally you, Teal, Carol, Teal, James Glenn, Carol, Guy Zander, and myself. But this one now has about 12 or 15 stories in it, all different holiday related or Christmas related myths, fantastic stuff. Some of it's reprints, some of it's original stuff, but fantastic. So now we have 5, or is it 6 volumes
6
of
volumes.
Soul Scream Anthology, and it feels like a complete set. So those are all on sale.
That's why it feels that way, because it's a complete set.
Yeah, because I did play around with the idea of the 7th, and I have actually 3 authors who have submitted stuff, but it'll be something else. It will be Soul Scream Anthology Presents and then something else. But I'm sorry to those 3 authors. I'm still trying to figure out the form. Secondly, I'm just waiting for the finished cover, which is being done by friend of the show, Rebecca Cuthbert.
Oh,
and
yes, Rebecca.
It is very cool cover. She's a great artist, and on top of being a great author, on top of being a really great writing professional. And we have a book from my company, Creep This Way, How to Become a Horror Writer by Rebecca. And if you're interested in how do we do that, what do we do in addition to just the writing? It's a great slim little volume. We just expanded that So that's got some extra stuff in it. That's out.
Creep This Way.
Creep This Way, yeah, that's out, award nominated and all that. And then once we get the cover, we'll have all the materials to a different printer, not my own. I'm going to be published by Alien Buddha Press in a horror story told in verse called
Oh, we're
It's
talking
Been a
poetry.
Privilege. It's all poetry,
Oh,
different forms of poetry, but the idea is it's told from the antagonist and it's his journal. He writes poems instead of journal entries. Some of them are great, some of them are not that great, depending on where he is in the story, but they tell a very clear horror crime story. And there are detectives that he's railing about, and we never name their names, but you and I know who they are. And speaking of which, the next Mallory and Gunner is coming out, and it's based on a short story that I've expanded to a novelette, and it's called Rivals, and most of it takes place in and around Yankee Stadium. So Matt Wilderson is doing that cover, and we hope to have that out in time for
spring training.
preseason, spring training, when the pitches, catches, and all that sort of stuff,
Okay.
to give people something to
So
have fun with.
you got a lot in the hopper here.
So yeah, and then we're gonna keep moving from there, but sure.
Excellent.
But as much fun as all that stuff is, I saw a post on social media, I think it was the last 2 days, from a certain friend of the show, co-host, as a matter of fact, co-founder, icon called Alex Simmons. And he's writing another icon. As a matter of fact, he's writing a character that I truly wanted to actually become when I was a teenager. Because as I've told Alex many times, I would go for allergy shots every week, every 2 weeks. And I'd give me one shot here, and he's like, you're too thin. And he'd give me a B12 shot over here. And I was hoping one day one of those shots would be super soldier serum. That's I was very young. And they never were.
No, they
I
just
was a
hurt.
big fan of Captain America and the Falcon. And I said, all right, well, I'm not going to get a super soldier. Sam Wilson is a real regular guy. And wow, he's noble and heroic. Maybe I can become the Falcon.
I love how your mind works. Yes.
uh,
So the short story there, folks, so we can get to
Here we go.
Yes, I was blessed once again, by the great writer, editor, and professor, Jesse Holland, who pulled together a wonderful cadre of people to write a series of short stories for Black Panther Tales of Wakanda two years ago. He pulled us together again, another team of people, to write a series of short stories for this new publication that's coming out called Captain America Shield of Sam Wilson. And that's coming out, I believe, January 14th. So that's going to be exciting. And I'm very excited to have some people read all the works that's in there, but in particular also read mine. Let me know what you think. But
Yeah.
I'm very excited about that. And that's coming out through Marvel Titan Books.
And that's really exciting. I'm looking forward to reading that as a fan as well as a friend.
Fan
And
of Sam
speaking
Wilson.
of
Yeah.
reading as a fan and a friend, I'm going to take a chance. I hope you don't get mad, but we're going to promote a friend of ours. Okay? Real
Okay,
quick.
we got to do it quickly now. Oh, wow. It's hard to, I'll pop that up there because, oh, it looks 3D now.
It does.
That's right.
Uh,
Anyway, what he's showing, folks, for those of you who are not watching us on YouTube, he is showing you Kolchak, the Night Stalker, the original
there you go.
story by Jeff Rice has
And
been.
it's just been republished by James Eklund and Monstrous Books in a gorgeous, beautiful book. It's got some interior illustrations. And another friend of the show, I guess I will just let this stay like this now. Another friend of the show, James Chambers, did the editing. And between him and both Jameses,
Yes.
gathered every version to get the original full Jeff Rice manuscript.
So they restored
They restored everything, yeah, because over the years, chapters would be dropped. or sequences. Now it's all full, and they printed it on this great paper, an off-white paper, and the font is so easy to read. I've been making a fuss, but
Good.
he's a friend
Okay.
of the show, so
And
go
and
check
I'm
it out, Kolchak
Yes,
fans.
go check it out. Now I'm going to get us back to where we say we were going to go, because we got to get this out there, because
Let's
what we're
do
saying
this.
is we're fans of this kind of material. Sam Wilson, the Night Stalker,
Let's talk about
Kolchak,
why
all of
these
this. Yeah,
work.
let's talk about why this works, because it works on us
Yeah,
and it
bro.
works on you. Okay. I am not a brain surgeon, nor a psychiatrist or psychologist or any of that kind of neat stuff. But I think that writers eventually become aware of how the human psyche works to a certain degree, because we basically, and I say this to a lot of my writing students, we manipulate people's emotions. That's what our stories do. And I'm not saying we do this for malicious reasons. We do this because we want people to get caught up in the story, follow characters, identify with certain problems, connect, enjoy, be frightened by all of those things. And in order for us to accomplish that, we have to have some idea of where the buttons are and what kind of imagery or choice of words or setups will stimulate the reactions that we're seeking. So, in particular, we picked these 5 tips that we want to share with you today, and they're all about certain triggers within the human psyche and how we as writers can tap into those. So, the first one we have is your characters need to have a clear goal or desire or ambition.
Hmm.
You need that. A lot of times people will say she's a good person, or he's messed up and he's going to go through this and he's going to go through that, and in the end such and such is going to happen. Yeah, but okay, he's messed up, but why is he messed up? How did he get to that? What does he want? Does he want to can stay that way? Does he want to improve? What's the journey this character is on? And whether or not he or she makes it becomes the conflict and some other things. What is your character's desire when the story starts? And does that change by the end of the story? And if it does change, how? That's the structure that you're trying to share with us. We
What?
often say, I'm sorry, go ahead. Did you going
No,
to say?
please keep going.
Yeah. We often say that the human brain craves the pursuit of something, pursuit of a better life, a better job, better relationships, more money, whatever it is, because that is a universal. When we use that in a story with our characters, something in the human beings, the people in our audience or our readership, connect to that. Right. An example would be, if you think about it, a lot of stories, especially 50 years ago, a lot of stories would be good person pursuing their dreams, their goals, encounters bad people, but somehow they overcome and they get it in the end. That's wonderful. So it's always good people doing the right thing, overcoming adversity, and prevailing at the end. And that's a nice and uplift. That's a thing that makes us feel good, or at least goes, if they can do it, maybe I can do it. But here's a TV series that was very popular and went in the opposite direction, Breaking Bad. And
Sure.
when your character starts out, what does he get hit with? He's a college professor. Or I think he's a professor.
I thought
He's
he was a high school
high,
teacher,
high, right, and
high
science,
school science teacher.
science teacher, right? Average job, average Joe, right? He's not a superhero in any way, shape, or form, right? And he finds out this average person making an average salary, that he's got cancer. He's dying from it. He's going to die. And he's got a wife and family. He's got a wife and kids. And he's got nothing to leave them, basically nothing. Plus, maybe
Well,
the
because
treatment.
the medical
Yeah, the
bills are going
medical
to
bill, the
wipe out
treatment.
whatever he would have. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So he's got to come up with a way to provide for them, and he's got not a lot of time, is at least the way he sees it. So he sets out to do something good for them, but his choice is to do something bad in order to do something good for them. And it's the story becomes, where does that journey take him? The craving initially is, I need to provide for my family. I need to make sure they're going to be okay. That comes from a place of love or a place of ego or whatever you want to imagine in terms of your character. But ultimately, I've got to do this for them. I've
Yes.
got to.
And Breaking Bad is an amazing school for screenwriting, for author creation, for character study, because we enter at vulnerability. And he and the former student, he chooses to work with. We watch the descent. And sometimes it looks like, all right, they're making tons of money, they're powerful, this is going up, but we see what's happening all around and to them and each choice and all that sort of stuff. And if you have the time to invest, this is a masterclass. If you need, I only got 2 hours, I only got 6 hours, I only got a couple hours, then I would suggest going to James Gunn and checking out his work, because James doesn't always take great people, but he always shows you their heart. If you look at what he did with the Suicide Squad, if you look what he did with the 3 Guardians of the Galaxy, and he had his hand in every appearance they made all the way through. And most recently, like I think it came out last month, the Creature Commandos on HBO Max. I think each episode's about 23 minutes, 33 minutes. And in that, they take an actual monster, a terrible person, a villain, and in showing little bits of where that person came from, we see characters that we can't help but connect to and root for.
Right.
And
And again,
watching how he does that
right.
again and again will really give you a great education on what you need to bring to character and characterization.
Exactly. And again, specifically in terms of this particular tip, what does the character want? What do they desire ultimately? What is that goal? Thanos, same thing. What is the character's goal? In the comics, it's power. But in the movies, it's a
In
goal.
comics,
It,
it's a woman.
yeah. In the movies, it's a situation of overpopulation of the universe. And if he can affect that, if you can affect that, life's going to be better for everybody. Now, just in order to affect that, I'm going to
Everybody
wipe out half
left.
the universe. But anyone who survives, it's going to be so much better. Life's going to be so much better.
But that
Crazy, yeah, but that's his goal. That's his desire.
and
And
that
we as the audience are looking at, yeah, there are problems with overpopulation, or there are problems with resources, and there are problems. So we can connect, we can understand that, we can maybe even agree in terms of the real world in which we live in. So then there's that connection. So that's how that works in terms of the desire from a character standpoint. And as he
right.
said, Dunn's
Well,
character,
again, is asking questions of the character. What does
right?
this character want? What's in the way of what this character wants? And then occasionally that comes to a really challenging question.
Hmm.
Overpopulation versus abundance, but at what price? For Thanos, leaving something for your family because you're dying of cancer. For Breaking Bad, there's a million stories, and looking at your favorite stories and ask them, what do they want and what's in the way?
And what are they willing to do to get it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very often you'll find out that what's in their way is themselves. And that's just a lot of fun to play with and to think,
Right.
especially your favorite characters. All right, what's next, Alex?
Number two, flaws. Okay, I was telling when Chris and I often refer to it when we were in the green room. We,
Yes.
we were talking, which is a little beige actually, but we were talking about character flaws, which, and I mentioned in particular because he likes to refer to the fact that I've been around since the forming of the first Rock, that back in the day, back in my day, a lot of our heroic characters were flawless. One of my personal favorites is the Lone Ranger. As a kid, I loved the Lone Ranger and Tonto. They were good guys. They went out and they stopped bad guys from doing bad things to good people. They get caught, they get tricked a little bit, but they'd always overcome. They'd always win out, and they'd always ride off without any thank you and all that kind of good stuff. And there were no flaws except maybe if you want to look at it that way, sometimes they were a little gullible. But bottom line, no. They had no flaws. They were solid individuals doing the right things for the right reasons. But as time progressed and storytelling progressed in terms of films, books, and television, we started to get a little bit more creative
Can,
with our
can,
heroes, with our characters, and giving them flaws made them more relatable.
can
Now,
I
again, I'm sorry, what were you going to say, Chris?
can I comment on Lone Ranger before we miss
Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
before
Watch what you say now. Watch what you say.
I love your take on Lone Ranger, but Lone Ranger. Remember he grew up in
Yeah,
the Bronx? He's a Long Ranger,
yeah.
like he was 3 blocks long.
A lone stranger?
Um,
Yeah, okay, yeah, go ahead.
my take on him, and I'm not sure when I switched over from he was flawless to I always thought he was driven by the origin of Lone
Hmm.
Ranger is that he was in a unit and everybody but got killed and he survived. And I always thought he was driven by survivor's guilt and try and be better, be the best he could be because he felt if he had been better that day. But he didn't never dwelt on it. This is all like reading between lines. Batman always dwells on it. Wolverine always dwells on it. Lone Ranger never did. He was quietly sunning
Well,
and
again, what you're doing is actually an excellent example of what I was just saying, because at
uh,
the time the character was created, that wasn't what they did with storytelling. You're now looking at it years later, and again, he's younger than I am. Yeah. So so at the point that he
significant.
started watching the show or getting reruns or whatever, he was seeing it a little differently than I did in my youth.
Yeah,
And then years later, as we grew as writers and creators, we began to analytically look at. So yes, you can say that. If you think about the Lone Ranger was not only a member of a unit that got wiped out and he was the only survivor, one of the people who got killed was his brother.
right.
So he lost his only surviving family member at that time, somebody he grew up with, and that's a tragedy. And then you say, why does Tonto hang with him after saving his life? Tonto going, take care, I'm out. But there'd been this exchange when they were younger men where the ranger had saved Tonto's life. So now here's Tonto's return to favor. Well, again, Tonto's not obligated. Now he could have left. But something about their solidity, their friendship or their honor, the belief that they could help make things better. So again, this is how it was presented to us. And even
Right.
then, if we want to look at it, and again, I'm going to get back to flawed characters in a moment. Even then, 1950s, Tonto was considered a sidekick. I always considered him a partner. So my concept of what their concept was different.
Yeah.
Tonto was a partner. If he hadn't been there a number of times, Ranger would be dead. Yes, if Lone Ranger wasn't there a number of times, Tonto would be dead. So ultimately, the way they told stories then was that. The way we look at stories now and over the past 20, 30 years is our characters need to have more relatability. And one of the things that people can relate to is flaws because we've all
Mhm.
got them. I don't care who you are, you got some flaws. It comes with the matrix. So, in looking at flaws in characters, I went back to a classic novel, which, if you think about it, yeah, this guy had some serious flaws. Moby Dick. Captain Ahab is obsessed with finding and killing this great white whale. So much so that everything about him is locked in on that. Everything he's got responsible for a crew of, I don't know, something like 20 some odd men. And basically they're whalers, which means you go out, you hunt for whales, you find it, you kill, you extract the riches from it and bring it back, and that's how you make your living. It's like being fishermen, but with a much bigger fish, right? But that's not what he's about. He's about finding this whale and killing it because of what happened in the past. So he's obsessed and he is selfish. And as the story continues, and it doesn't go well, if you haven't read the book or haven't seen the movie, too bad. You've had enough time. It ends up badly, not only for him, but for almost every member of his crew, save one. So
Right.
the Lone Ranger survived the ambush of the Texas Ranger troop that he was with, and Ishmael, the one sailor, survives the complete destruction and death of the rest of the crew in the ship because of one person's obsession in this particular story. So Ahab was flawed, and this is what those flaws led to. So if you have a character who's flawed, again, there are things that you can do with that character to make the story more fascinating, but also more relatable. I don't know, Chris, do you want to comment on any of that?
We've gone to more and more anti-heroes and flawed heroes to the point where I don't know if an old-fashioned pure good hero has been introduced to the reading public or the film public. Yeah, to go back to our guy who I just talked about, James Gunn, is he let the first trailer go for Superman, and it gets a whiff of that pure goodness. And
Mm-hmm.
and I think that'd be a great place to explore, because especially in the modern world, there's there's less purchase for that kind of purity these days, right? But it might be exactly what we need. So I'm interested to see where that goes. But character flaws, you can, one of the great things about character flaws is you wind up finding like-minded people who like the same character, and they might pick up on different flaws.
Mm-hmm.
Or one fan might think this is a virtue, and the other one is like, nah, it's a flaw. To stay with pop culture, let's take Batman. Some people say that drive to make sure what happened to him never happens to anybody else in Gotham City. Watching your parents murdered in front of your eyes. Never going to let that happen again. And some people say that makes him a flawed but virtuous hero. And others say that it makes him a psychopath on the side of the right, being the heroic tendencies as opposed to,
The political
Hannibal
stance.
Lecter types. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is where flaws enrich your character, to allow people to interpret, to bring their own experience to interpreting what the Wolverine, an animal, or a noble hero is. There's a very flawed neighborhood woman, older woman, has kids, has marital problem, all that sort of stuff. And she's living in South Boston area, in a book called Small Mercies by Dennis Lehane. And it came out about 2 years ago now. But you were introduced to her, and she's everything we want to hate on a small neighborhood scale. And then she finds herself going up against exactly the amplified hate that made her hate possible, and that ruins entire neighborhoods and cities and countries and the world. And we find ourselves really cheering on and rooting for this flawed woman. She's actually a terrible human being, but everyone else that she's dealing with is far worse. That's fascinating, and it says so much about culture and all that sort of stuff. So I think the thing to explore is how do you put that in a character without preaching? How do you put those things in a character without it feeling stilted and forced? And it comes back to character,
Yeah.
asking yourself questions, getting to know the character, getting to know the setting, the neighborhood, the time, the religious situations, the political situations, the neighborhood situation, whatever. The more you know about your characters, the more questions you ask about your characters, the more you're going to organically be able to put those flaws in,
And use
so they
them
reflect
appropriately.
more human experience.
Right.
And
More
that's when you
authentic.
start making the connection with the audience.
So again, and there are a number of examples, and maybe towards the end, we'll throw out a few more just to tighten the focus on it. So let's move to the next one, and this is a big one because I often say that in writing a story, there's the triumvirate that one has to look for. There's plot, there's character, and there's conflict. Those are the three prime elements that you want to pull together in terms of your pursuit of writing a good story. You want to come with a great plot, you want to create compelling characters, and you want to have a really strong conflict, because that's the match, that's the kerosene that's going to ignite everything else. And so in conflict, and uncovering the conflict in your characters and in your stories is absolutely necessary. Sometimes some of my students will say, I don't think we need a conflict here because she's this or he's that. And I'm going, okay, so then what happens in the story? He does this and she does that, and then and they have the problem that they're trying to work there. So that's a conflict. What's the problem? What is the essence of the problem? Why is it a problem? Why isn't it just a breezy, easy day for them? Because they're trying to say that's a conflict. But I thought a conflict's not a fight. It's not just a fight. It's not a war scene. It's not a robbery scene. Conflict is if you want something and you can't get it. That's it. So, and I use sometimes, as an example, I use one of the most peaceful kind of storylines as opposed to something like pop culture, like the Avengers or whatever. I'll use Coda, the movie Coda, where this young girl, she is born into a family, a mother, father, and brother are all deaf. They're all hearing impaired, never had
Right.
hearing, have never heard. She, on the other hand, has hearing and loves to sing and has a beautiful voice. And
Hmm.
they're fishermen in this coastal town, town. And every early morning, she goes out on the boat with them. They haul in the fish, get back at somewhere around 7:30, 8 o'clock, unload. She communicates with the speaking hearing world in terms of negotiating for her family, then gets on a bike and goes to high school.
Yeah.
And the story picks up in her last year of high school. And she decides to join a chorus or a choral group that's being formed. And when she auditions, and she's very shy, when she auditions, the musical director, the teacher, hears her voice and comes to her and says, look, if you work with me for this semester, I can get you to the point where you'll be able to audition for a prestigious Boston Music Conservatory. You've got the talent. Work with me. You'll be able to audition for it. Now she wants to do this is exciting, but at the same time, she's got two conflicts. One, am I good enough? I don't know if I can really do. So it's lack of confidence. The other is, if I do this and I go off to Boston to college, what's going to happen to my family? I've been the hearing and the voice for them for years. How are they going to survive? Do I have the right to do this? So these are conflicts. No shootouts, no big
Right.
fight scenes. It's the human experience, and this is a conflict. Good conflicts help you make for good stories, and your characters, who they are, become even more clear as that story unfolds.
Yeah.
By
It.
in terms of how they deal with that conflict.
I would add to that conversation of that absolutely beautiful and wonderful movie is that simple question: how can a hearing girl live her life and pursue her dreams while not letting down the family that so relies upon her? Right? Simple. And then they were able to layer all aspects of life to enrich that and the questions of that. How will they deal with the fish, the market for the fish, if someone can't talk to them? And you have the, how would I express that? And you see the little moments of the fish market people giving them stuff and misunderstanding the loud voice of a deaf person as anger and all
Mm,
that. That's so rich. But also the hearing person meets a guy, a boy that she likes, and brings home, and the parents, both deaf, are upstairs being intimate, but they don't know how loud they're being. So there's that comedy of,
mm,
there's so much that you can develop from a character flaw, from that little moment, that little quirk, and then it becomes a question. And then how do you explore that? God, it's worthwhile. And that's a great movie. I had forgotten about that movie and how great it is.
yeah.
Good job, Alex Simmons.
Well,
What's
thank you, sir.
next?
Thank you, sir. So again, conflict. Keep that in mind. And there obviously are other examples of that. And again, towards the end of the show, we'll come back and we'll
Oh,
mention one.
before we go, I wanted to add really quickly, like you said, there's no fights, there's no punches. Kevin Smith is a ridiculous filmmaker, right? He makes good films that are often ridiculous. But there's almost, except for Cop Out, which he was hired for, there's almost never a gun. There's never, you know, superhero battles or anything like that. Most of his stuff is dialogue. And you can really study conflict and dialogue just by watching his goofy stuff. So there's no end to where conflict can be found. Trust yourself, ask the questions.
There you
What's
go.
next, sir?
Oh, so let us talk about, again, we're talking about the wonderfulness of characters and we're learning about them through conflict. But in order for them to show who they are, it's good if the writer knows where they're coming from. And that takes us to backstory and how a character's backstory shapes who that character is. And then what you, as the writer, need to identify as elements that the audience need to learn about this character. Because there's two sets of information in terms of backstory. There's the information that you need to share within the story in order to move the character along and help us, the audience, truly appreciate what's going on. But there's also that section of backstory information that only the writer need know.
Mm-hmm.
We're never going to see it in the story, but it informs the writer so the writer knows what to do with the character, how the character is going to react in a particular circumstance, even though there's no talk about they were abused when they were kids, or they never had enough money, or they were always the favorite, or backstory is very key. And for instance, I think in the movie, and this is one of the examples that I found in research, The Joker, the 2019 film, not the more recent one. We see this character, we see that he is damaged. He is truly damaged. And one could assume that maybe it's a mental ailment, something he was born with. One could assume maybe he's done too much drugs when he was younger, or he drinks or whatever. No, part of it is a series of abusive situations that he went through in his younger years coming up, and how that impacted on him to the point of where now he is so broken inside that in order to cope, he has to manipulate those fragments into a world or a mindset that allows him to move through the day to day. And the more he does that, the more he becomes this entity that we watch, who really becomes extremely not only destructive, but inspires destruction. So the backstory of that character is a portion of it that we see as the audience, but there's also a lot more information that the writer had privy of in order to
Yeah.
help them create the images that we saw.
And I'm a big fan of this. You know, I'm a big fan of this process. But I'll explain it this way. You can write a story with a flawed character, an interesting story, without doing all the back story work. It's going to read like a story outline, or it's going to wind up being a thinner story. But if you walk around and hang around with your characters, if you mow the lawn with your character, or a sandwich with your character, if you walk the dog with your character, and how would your character relate to this dog? How would your character relate in a mall? How much money did your character have growing up? How much and all these things. The more it informs, the more the story writes itself, and you are a conduit because you're drawing on all this wealth of information that you know that helps you write the reactions the character has to the world.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes flashbacks and you see it, sometimes you never see it at all. Rocket Raccoon was a great character in the first two Guardians, in the Avengers appearances he had and all that. It wasn't to the third and what was it, the
Most recent.
Christmas special, all that, but it was the third one that you got his backstory. And what that did was there's a great saying in writing that when a reader is reading a story, it should feel like the reader is on the limb of or the bottom of a tree or the limb of a tree where there are smaller branches going out in every direction, and you're not really sure which direction is the right direction. But at the end of the story, looking back, it's clear that was only the only direction you could have ever taken to get where you got in this story. It wasn't until that third movie that we got to see what made Rocket, and then we understand so much more about all of the characters as they pertain and as they feel to them. And James Gunn says the first movie was about mother, the second one about fathers. This one is about the self, and becoming able to accept yourself was the big journey of the whole thing. And all those, that's what backstory can do,
Well,
to give you enough to unfold when it's right to unfold.
and
And when
in
it's
terms,
before that, you'll have information yourself that you don't need to burden the story with until the right moment.
right, and in terms of again how this connects to your audience, once again we're at that point where how are we gaining empathy? How are we gaining sympathy for these characters? Rocket in one of the earlier films made a remark. I don't have these things memorized, but made a remark about him being the only one of his kind. There were a couple
I'm
of
the
lines in
only
the movie.
me, like
Yeah, but
nobody me like except me.
and those lines stand by themselves as okay, he's the only one of his kind. Okay, maybe I'm curious about that. Who cares? Oh, we're already moving on.
Right.
It's this story, these moments in this story, that we gain context to that line. And we, as the audience, maybe we've seen the other films and we thought, oh, I remember when he said, oh, snap, this is why.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, he was mutilated. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
gee, oh man. There's no
Spoilers.
hope for him ever finding another unless somebody else does the same thing to. Oh, gee. Now we, as the audience, can connect to him in a way that we never would have if we didn't know this.
Yeah. And it
And
allows us to connect to everyone else more strongly too.
right, and we can feel his pain.
Yeah.
Maybe not the same way, obviously. And then again, in the reality that your audience member lives, maybe there is something in their life that hurt them in a way, or maybe they feel excluded. Maybe they feel like they're the only one who'll ever get them, get me. I'm the only one who gets me. I don't have anybody else that I can connect to. Something in that mindset will go, oh wow, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
Or I feel for him more. I'm rooting for him more now, or whatever. And when Rocket excels beyond that, because he has these tragic moments where we're getting what happened to him, when he frees, yeah, I'm giving away some more of the story, folks. When he frees these other creatures who are what he once was and can never be again, when you see that, you now know he's their protector. You now understand why he will do anything to make sure they're not harmed. We can relate as parents, we can relate as uncles and aunts. If there's some little person or some, as pet owners, if we have a pet that we love and we're going to pay all kinds of crazy money to keep them healthy, right? This is how our brain and our personalities are connecting to the story. And in this case, it's because of the backstory information that we're getting.
Yeah. And the technique of revealing the backstory that you choose to reveal little by little, so that what is presented as your character, say in the beginning of the story or early on the story, may completely turn around how you see the character as backstory is added. When we see Peter Dinklage's character in Game of Thrones, or when we read him in the books, he's a drunk, wisecracking, womanizing whoremonger of a dwarf with a horrible scar across his face. But by the end of our time with it, we realize how much more he is and how important he is to the story of all the characters around him. And we also understand why he's the way he is, and
Mm-hmm.
why he drinks, self-medicating, and why he goes to hookers, because he's seen as some kind of beast, some kind of freak. When anywhere he can get some human contact and all that. But as his other skills are revealed, it's become such a much more deep and rewarding character. And all of that comes from backstory. Before a word was written, the author knew a lot about this character. And to go back to Rocket, the reason James Gunn took that opportunity to do the Guardians was something clicked with him about Rocket. He said, "Oh, he's the saddest, angriest character in the universe, and I know why." And Gunn says, "He's me. That's who I see. That's why I love Rocket so much." And when we think about the characters that we have loved ourselves, encountering them in reading or film or TV, and what drew us to them, we learn a lot about ourselves. And it also, and this is the secret need of a story in the universe, when we see ourselves in those characters and we see that they make progress in their journey, it gives us hope that we can make progress in ours.
Exactly.
And that's why
And
all
that
these
leads
little
us
things are important.
that leads us to our last one, number 5, which is transformation.
Yes, my
Transformation.
brother.
Yes, transformation is the thing we watch happen and the thing we wait for to see the end result. So we mentioned earlier about Breaking Bad. Walter starts out in one frame of mind and one position in his life and pretty much a victim in that circumstance. He's got a disease he didn't ask for that's going to take his life, which he can't stop. And subsequently he doesn't have much money to begin with, and treatment for that disease is going to suck whatever money he does have, which is not going to leave anything for his family, his wife, and child. And so he's got to do something about that. But oh dear God, what? And then as he comes to an answer and begins to move along those choices, we watch this transformation and we're going, how much can he do? How far can he go? How low can he go? How dangerous is this going to be? Is he going to survive? And we watch that unfold until we
It's
finally
that slow moving car crash, right? It's like,
yeah, right. Exactly. And that is in and of itself it's a drug in a way. What's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? How is he going to make it through this? One of my favorite references is the Lord of the Rings series. My favorite character in that is not Frodo, and it's not Gandalf, and it's not the Ranger, and it's oh God, just I started to say his name, it went out of my head. Yeah, Sam. It's Sam.
damn
Sam.
why Gamgee.
Sam's my boy. And Sam starts out in the beginning of that film. He agrees to go along with Frodo on this journey, but he's really a shyer guy. I don't mean shy-er. He's a guy who lives in the Shire. His life is in the Shire. It's an easygoing life. I do what I do. I have my house. I'm a nice, quiet guy. I'm your neighbor. I'm all that. I'm not adventurer. I'm not a warrior. I'm not clever. I'm not, okay, I'll go with you, Frodo, but I really don't want to go. So this is what we see in the beginning. And through that first movie, with all the terrible things that are happening, he wants to go home.
Yeah.
He does not want to be there. This is getting worse and worse. And as you get to the end of that first film, Frodo's in the boat. And again, anybody who's been listening to the show, you know this story because I've told it before, but hang in there. Frodo's in the boat. He's pushing away from the shore. He's leaving Sam standing on the shoreline. He's saying, Sam, go back to the Shire. The other heroes are fighting and holding back demons and creatures and all that kind of. I've got to go across this lake. I got to continue on this pilgrimage to return this ring because horrible things will happen otherwise. But you can go home. You can be safe. And Sam starts walking into the water, following the boat, going, "No, Mr.
And he
Frodo, I got
can't
to come
swim.
with you. I got to come with you, Mr. Frodo. I got to come." And he's, "No, Sam, go back." And the boat keeps drifting and farther away from the shore. And Sam's walking until he's underwater. Bubbles are coming up, and he's not coming up. And Frodo's going, "What the heck?" Reaches in, pulls him into the boat. Sam's gasping and choking because he was drowning. And then Frodo goes, "What do you do? Why
Why?
didn't you swim?" He goes, "I don't know how to swim." "What is wrong with you? Why didn't you stay on shore?" And his answer was, "Because I promised I would not leave you alone."
I made a promise.
Yeah. And the moment he
Yeah.
said that, I went, "Holy smokes, Sam's my boy.
Yeah.
Sam is my boy."
I love your choice because of the four of them, Frodo, seemed to understand that it was on him to do this, right?
Yep.
And he
Yep.
knew the Bilbo story better than the others. And the other two, Pippin and Merry, are at first just comic relief, and there's hero's journey are also valuable. But Sam, he just wanted to be loyal to his. He was a landscaper for Frodo. He just wanted to be loyal. You're right. He's a friend. He's a local guy. He's too shy to ask Rosie, the love of his life, for anything. And he innocently makes a promise to Gandalf, who Gandalf is not above using these
That's
poor
right.
innocent,
That's right.
hobbits. You protect him, you stay, and don't let anything happen to Frodo. And Sam takes that promise
To heart.
literally. So the idea is friendship was important, and his word was important. He
Absolutely.
takes on everything else
Yep.
out of that simple. And if you want to call it a flaw, it's a flaw. If you want to call it an attribute, that's fine, because they are both sides of the same coin. But that little simple decision that Tolkien made about that character allows so much more of the story to unfold.
And what we
And that's
have in
what we're
terms,
talking about.
what we have too in terms of, again, the audience connection. He's the every guy. He's the every person. He is the average Joe or Jane. He is us. Because
He's the
most of us,
worst person to be in this adventure.
but
He's got the worst resume for
he's the
this
person.
adventure.
He's the store clerk who suddenly finds himself facing or herself facing a robber with a gun, and you have no martial arts training. You're the victim in any number of circumstances where you're not prepared for this, you're not trained for this, and you don't know if anybody's coming to save you. He is the every person, and yet when he could have turned and run, he doesn't, because
Yeah,
he gave his word and he's loyal to his friend. And
yeah,
we got to root for that. And some
yeah,
part of us as the audience, and again, we're talking today about these connections to your audience, to your readers,
yeah,
because most of us, want someone like that in our lives
yeah.
if we're not that person ourselves.
And
And even if you are that person, you want somebody like that. You want
yeah,
someone to have your back.
I like that the mistakes that Sam makes in this story are good, positive, thoughtful, loving mistakes. Like
Hmm.
when he goes to cook, when they're on the little flat top, and the riders see the fire and come. They had been walking forever,
Hmm.
and his urge is to serve, to make sure they have something to eat. That's all. It's so innocent.
Yep.
He doesn't understand the greater dangers of the world, but he has those two things: loyalty and honor. And that love gets him through,
And
which is
and let's talk
fascinating.
about that. Let's talk about that because pardon me, because this is transformation.
Mhm.
By the time we reach the end of this story, I don't
Mount
the end of that
Doom,
first film or the chapters and by the time we reach the arc, we cover the entire arc. Sam does something in that section of the story that he could not have done at the beginning
which is
when he takes on that spider.
he takes on that spider when he carries the ring by carrying Frodo, right?
Yep.
Yeah, he couldn't
He
possibly
couldn't
have
have,
done those things.
right. He couldn't have done that in the beginning. He wouldn't have known how. He might not have had any faith in himself. He was not driven to the point of going, I got to do this because, but at the same time, it's still the same person. And they're going, this is my friend. I will
Right.
face this monster for my
It's
friend.
it's still out of
You
that
know?
loyalty. And
Yeah.
I'll say two other things. That's transformation,
Mm-hmm.
because he transfers to a true hero, still out of the same drive,
Yep.
loyalty and a
Yep.
promise. And there's one other thing that he could never do at the beginning of the book, but at the end of the book he can, and that's ask Rosie out.
Mm-hmm.
And he marries that girl and lives happily ever after. You got to do some things.
Yeah. You got to make those scary choices. You got to
But
take those risks.
and I love that you can go back to all of those, all of the things that occur throughout that big epic for Sam. they're based on those two things, loyalty and the promise. And love. Both of them are done out of love.
And here's the thing, we're talking about a book that was written, I don't know how many decades ago.
Sure,
All
sure,
right.
sure.
Like I said, I mentioned Moby Dick earlier, and now we're talking about the Lord of the Rings, the Hobbits. All that was written, God, what, 50, 60 years ago?
Yeah.
Longer than that.
But you can see it and stuff right now.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah. These are universals.
It stays true because you can look at, again, some of the examples that came up in research, Forrest Gump or Fleabag. Again, you're looking at transformation. Where does your character start? What is he or she doing? Where do they stand? What do they feel? What are they up against? What are they afraid of? Or how selfish are they? How self-centered are they at the beginning? And where are they at the end of the film? And did it work for or against them? These are those things. And we, again, as the audience, because again, we're talking about the connection. We, as the audience, we're watching this. We're living vicariously through some of these experiences. And we're rooting for or we're rooting against, depending on the protagonist, antagonist POV, depending on what it is they're doing. It's funny too, because with your action films, you're getting this adrenaline rush. With your romance films or your tragic dramas, you're having more of an emotional catharsis. You're feeling, you're hurting for them, or you're hoping for them. So again, we're playing with the emotions, and as I said before, and Chris and I have said this many times, good storytellers manipulate their audience's emotions. That's part of what you're there for. As the creator, you're there for that, but also as the audience. You come in there. What are you going to do? How's this going to be? Am I going to be excited? Am I going to be scared? Am I going to have laughs? What are you going to do for me? And if you don't get that, you're disappointed. We let you down. So again, we need to be, as creatives, we need to understand what it is we do with our stories, but it also helps for us to understand why what we do works and then strive to do that even better.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add to that?
I think you've encapsulated it. I'm terrified of going off on another tangent.
Then let's just do this. Let's go back just quickly and see if we can come up with one example for at least 2 or 3 of these. So I didn't mention
that we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah, no, we've done the 5, yeah, but we haven't talked about it yet. Or if you, yeah, we haven't talked about it. Let's keep it that. Like for number 2, flaws. I mentioned Moby Dick, but I didn't mention The Sopranos. Tony Soprano, he's a mob boss.
Different kind of white whale.
He can have people snuffed, killed, murdered, right? He can have people hurt, injured. He's a tough dude. He also suffers from panic attacks. He's going through therapy because he's confused. He's messed up in certain ways, and he admits it enough to himself to go to a therapist. But he can't have that out there in the world.
No.
Now, his boys can't know about this because that's not the image he has to maintain.
Yeah.
He understands he's flawed. In a world that he lives in, a world that he's making his living in, he can't have these weaknesses, but he does. And he, at least in some way, shape, or form, he's trying to do something about it or exploring them. So that's one for that one. Do you have any for flaws?
Do we want to go modern, or does it make a difference?
Doesn't matter. Just another example.
We don't talk enough about pulp, so let's go to a pulp hero, right?
Okay.
And Doc Savage, right? A character created to be flawless and raised by scientists to be the epitome of the perfect physical specimen, intellectual specimen. But all these scientists forgot about the emotional specimen. So while he is morally solid and physically impressive and intellectually a genius, and he can do surgery as well as engineering, as well as adventuring and inventing, what he can't do, what he's not comfortable with, is interaction with women, because they forgot to bring women around. It's such a sexist thing, but it was the 30s or 40s that it's funny that it's an unwritten comment on the mindset of the time. And he's got a cousin, Pat Savage, a woman who flaunts this and teases him. It was a fascinating choice way back when to make him have to struggle in that way. I imagine doing it today it would be so much more problematic for Doc Savage to not be able to deal with this, because there's a ton of women that will not take that noise.
No.
Or if he was raised in a modern times, like say, even if it's the last 20 years, there would surely be a diversity of scientists, both gender, identity,
Yeah.
and ethnic and economic. So that flaw may have been worked out on him from him. Where would it go? One of the reasons I brought up Guardians of the Galaxy so often today is Gloria chose the third movie as something to watch last night, and I got to watch the glory of the culmination of Rocket's story. But also, I started realizing that they played with the high evolutionary, the antagonist in that movie, as an extremely flawed god. The kind of God when we're in the hospital or we're in some place where we've lost somebody and we're like, how could a loving God let this happen? And this is the worst answer for that, because you were just scrap paper onto his other designs and he's casting you aside. Holy crap. Once I saw that interpretation, the movie took on yet another dimension, and that performance is extraordinary as a flawed and failing God. There's just so much that you can play, and I think that applies all the way through. I'll just shut up there.
Okay, let's just for time's sake, we'll hit one more. Let's go with. Did I say anything about this? No, we did talk about Game of Thrones. We did talk about that. We didn't. Oh, I think we may have actually.
The
Uh,
only one that I saw that we didn't talk about was film example, The Dark Knight.
okay. You had mentioned Batman a couple of times during the conversation, but that's in terms of the conflict of looking at a character who's in conflict. And there's a couple of ways people look at that too. Uh, Bruce, what you said, Bruce Wayne is trying to prevent, in his Batman persona, he's trying to prevent people from experiencing the trauma that he did, which
Oh,
is
yeah.
to see his parents shot down in front of their eyes. I think another conflict that Batman deals with is very much, I won't take a life unless you see the
Right.
Tim Burton movies. But the Batman that I've known for years in terms of the books and so on, I won't take a life. So he's the most dangerous fighter in hand-to-hand combat. He's taken on all kinds of weapons and things like that. And the Joker has escaped and killed and escaped and killed and been caught and escaped and killed again and again. And people say, why don't you just take him out so we don't have to see him again? And Batman won't do it because that's the line he won't cross. But by the same token, it's a temptation.
Yeah.
It is not that thought doesn't go through his mind. It is not that he's incapable of it physically. It is he is fighting quite often not to cross that line.
Yeah.
And I think that's key. And that's why, again, sorry, Tim, but that's why those moments in his films piss me off because it took away from that more really intriguing aspect of a character who's capable. He's absolutely hand to hand or with weapons capable of snuffing half of the people he's gone up
Yeah.
against.
I
And
think
he
that's the
won't do it.
great unwritten Batman story, right? An internal Batman story when he's in a fight to the death with the Joker after and reminding himself of all of the mass murders that the Joker has committed. And while he's fighting, Batman is always 3, 4, 5, 6 steps ahead.
Steps ahead, yeah.
We always go back to Neil Adams and Denny O'Neil. There used to be that, and Frank Miller would have the internal Batman say, kick to the knee, take out
Right.
the this.
Yeah.
That fight with Batman Joker where he's saying this death blow, that death blow, and he has to tell himself over and over again, no, no, because that would bring you closer to him, closer
Yep.
to the abyss, and I will not go. We are talking about the Dark Knight here, and it's a great example. But again, Glorious and I watch a lot of films or rewatch a lot of films. I think people sleep on Batman Begins. I saw
Oh,
that
okay.
recently, and it is a great study in how you define fighting evil and how you define who to save, who's worth saving, because Bruce Wayne
In
Batman
sequence.
versus Ra's al Ghul's philosophy is a great argument. And we go way back to Aristotle. The plays at that time, the stories that people went to see were called the arguments, and it really hasn't changed. The greatest thing you can do with characters is let them play out an argument, a moral dilemma, a desire, and the conflict, right? What you need is you got a character, you got the character desire, and what obstacles are in between, and what a person is willing to do or not do to get to that goal. And in Batman Begins, Bruce Wayne, Batman, Ra's al Ghul are the very opposite side of the moral desire to bring safety and peace or to get rid of evil. Fascinating. And again, it informs character on both sides.
Exactly. And again, if you haven't seen that movie, too bad, because the way it ends is, and I'm not going to say what that is, but the way it ends underscores exactly what Chris was saying in many ways, and I think delivers in a much better way on than the Tim Burton films, because yes, there's a great evil, and I'm dealing with this great evil, but I'm going to do it in a way that allows me to sleep tonight.
Yeah.
To stand my moral ground or my ethical ground, or to not simply just not fall into the abyss. You know, it's not that I consider myself bigger or higher or grander than anybody else, but I won't do that. I won't take that last step. Because once again, if you look at any of the pop culture characters, Batman is often said to Superman and some of the other Justice League members, yeah, I figured out a way to stop every one of you. Because if you ever cross the line, we've got to be able to stop you. Think how much power is here.
Yeah.
Think what we could do if we cut loose. But yeah, I figured out a way to stop every single one of you. Power needs to be kept in check. And that could be our political statement for today too. So anyway, folks, again, taking it back to how we as creatives stimulate the minds of our audiences, our readership. This is something you might want to get a little bit more familiar with, or at least give it some more thought as you are developing your stories. What kind of characters are you creating? What kind of stories are you creating? What kind of conflicts are you creating? Understanding those, looking at those, then start to look at how will I make this relatable, or how will I gain empathy from my readership? How will I move the emotions of my audience in a way that makes this a satisfying storytelling experience for them?
And when you're doing that, if you're doing that and you're not writing your story, you're still writing, because there's a lot of stuff that goes on here before these get to dance.
That's right. And on that note, I will say, Chris, thank you very much. It's been a great experience.
It is always an honor. It's always, and now it's a bigger honor because now I get to talk to someone who has written Sam Wilson, Captain America, on top of all of the other legendary things. I am just a small pea in the vegetable salad that is Alex Simmons. You know what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen? One pea, that's me, and he's the entire vegetable aisle of ShopRite. That's Alex Simmons.
Thank you. I can't say that anyone's ever said that about me before. What should people do, Chris? Aside from going to ShopRite?
Ladies and gentlemen, you have survived this entire episode. You deserve to hit and subscribe and come in again next week, knowing that you can survive whatever the hell we talk about and tell the damn story. It's good to you. It's going to be good for you.
Yes, it's going to be healthy, right? Like the vegetables aisle.
Like the entire vegetable aisle, that is Alex Simmons.
Goodbye, everybody.
Peace.